Hey, hello everyone, this is Highlander from MTG Cardsmith doing another custom Magic the Gathering card review, and today we're reviewing a card by Gloomy and Sunny 101. I think this is the second card he's given us, don't quote me on that. But he's not a frequent poster, so kind of excited to see what he's got for us. Well, one thing he's got for us is a really risque photo, that's for sure. Or photo, piece of art, let's say. So what do we got here? We got Skull Sarcophagus, a really crazy looking thing here. And I'm going to be honest, this is just a random side note. I really like weird stuff like this. Like, I mean, okay, like the lady I could maybe do without. It just kind of distracts from the whole thing. But I love when something looks really alien like this. Like that's one of the reasons why I loved the Eldrazi so much, the original Eldrazi. They just look so strange. But, I guess that was probably not the best search. Type line. Eldrazi. Do you like Eldrazi? A lot of them are just so strange looking, and a lot of the new ones aren't really that strange, but a lot of the older ones were super weird, like, you know, Brood Warden. I remember, like, especially the big ones. I mean, obviously, Emrakul is just, like, really cool looking, in my opinion. Where's Emrakul? Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. Where are you? Yeah. This is just, like, such cool art. Like, I just love how strange this is. Like, it's like, looks like a mushroom floating. It looks like a floating mushroom rock with like a bunch of tentacles and arms coming out of it. This is just such a cool design. Like, I love stuff like this, you know. Often when you're creating a creature of some kind, it's like it's really common to take a creature that already exists and modify it, right? Be like, oh, it's a cat, but it has horns. Or like, oh, it's got a human shape, but it's reptilian, right? Things like that. But like stuff like this, to me, is just, I just find this to be so cool. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. Anyway, that's just kind of a random little aside there. So anyway, for that reason, I kind of like this art. It's a little off-center. I don't know if that was... I don't know what the deal with that is, if that's actually how the image is. But anyway, let's move on to the actual card. So we got a 10-mana 10/10 legendary artifact creature construct. Okay, so we're not using the artifact border. That's unfortunate. As an additional cost, I should say, to cast Skull Sarcophagus, or to cast this, you may sacrifice any number of creatures you control. Excuse me. For each creature sacrificed, Skull Sarcophagus gains the following effects. 1 to okay. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, so let's see. You sacrifice any number of creatures. For each creature sacrificed... Okay, I see. It's a... okay, well, let's just read. 1 to 3. Skull Sarcophagus... Wow. Is it just me or that hard to say? Skull Sarcophagus gains Death Touch. 4 to 6. Skull Sarcophagus gains Fear. 7. Okay. I mean, I assume this is supposed to say 7 plus, but it's written a little strange. Skull Sarcophagus gains protection from non-mono black. Okay. Okay, so interesting card. I'll tell you what I like about this card. I like this idea here where you're getting a bonus based on how many creatures you sacrificed. I think that is cool. I haven't seen too much of that, I don't believe. Now, the reason you generally tend to not see that a lot is because it's hard to have that many creatures on the board. I mean, 7 creatures on the board to sacrifice for this one thing. You know, that's a huge cost, and you also have to have all those creatures in play, but... So, you know, execution-wise, I have some issues with this, and I'll get to that. But as far as the concept goes, I think it's a very cool concept. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty here. So first issue is, like I mentioned before, is this should have an artifact, a black artifact border. They may not have a legendary black artifact border, which might be why you use this particular border. But this doesn't really need to be a legendary creature. Like, I mean, legendary creature. I know everyone loves making their cards legendary because it means that that creature can be a commander, right? But in actuality, legendary is really a tool to be used if your creature has an effect that you don't think should stack or doesn't make sense to stack, would be another way to do it, right? So, for example, Thalia, right? Let's look at Thalia for a moment. Screeful, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. Let's get the good art. Come on. Let's get the good art. Where's the good art? Here we go. So, Thalia is a legend. Sorry, that's like a digital print. There we go. So Thalia is a legendary human soldier. Not many people would pick Thalia to be their commander. Okay, if you pick Thalia to be your commander, you're probably just griefing your friends, you know. But like, the reason this card is legendary is because if it wasn't, this card would be bonkers in multiples, right? Like, this card's already really good against certain decks. And if you get like 2 of these out, you could like the more of these you have out, the more you could sort of just like lock your opponent out, right? So they make Thalia legendary, and therefore, like, you get this powerful effect, but it doesn't stack up to become like way too much, right? That's a good reason to make something legendary. I see a lot of people making things legendary simply because they're commander players, and in commander it doesn't matter. It's like only upside to make something legendary generally, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some, you know, weird random downsides, you know, things that care about legendary creatures or whatever, but there's almost no downside to making something legendary because A, it means you can make it a commander, and B, it's a singleton format anyway, right? But to me, this does not look like it should be a legendary card. It's not a card that... First of all, it's called Skullscar. Oh my god, I cannot say that. First of all, it's called Sarcophagus, which is not really... I mean, what, there's only one of these? There's only one skull sarcophagus in the entire metaverse? I don't know, right? But like the effects here aren't exactly effects that like don't want to stack these, or you like oh, it would be too good if you had multiple of these in your deck. Like, no, I mean, or like multiples of them in play. Like, this doesn't really need to be a legendary creature. So then again, we are talking about a limitation of Cardsmith, but I always tend to there's sort of two ways to address constraints that you're given, right? One is to ignore the constraints and try to do the thing you're trying to do anyway, but have it affect your design somehow. So in this case, that's the case, right? Like, well, assuming you knew that you could choose a legendary artifact, or excuse me, assuming you knew that you could choose a black artifact border, but instead chose to go with this border because there's no legendary artifact black border. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Assuming you had all that information, you chose to go with this border instead of the artifact border because it's a legendary creature, right? So you kind of decided, well, whatever, I'll just sort of ignore the constraint and just do whatever I want. But I think your design suffers for that, right? My approach, and the approach that I tend to think people should take, is to embrace your constraints and alter your design to meet the constraints. Okay, constraints are often a very good thing because they often create better designs. So, in my opinion, had you just not made this legendary, I think it would have worked out a lot better. You would be able to get the artifact border. The legendary doesn't really do much for this, you know, and that's just like an easy trade-off, right? Anyway, sorry, long rant for no reason. Okay, so that's an issue. There are some wording issues here, so let me go ahead and do some rewording here. So, as an additional cost to cast this, I think you can say this nowadays. Sacrifice any number of creatures. Okay, so first of all, as an additional cost to cast this, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. If you sacrifice any number of creatures, a number can be 0, right? So you don't really need this may here. You could just say sacrifice any number of creatures, and you can choose to sacrifice 0. And you do not need to specify that the creatures that you're sacrificing are under your control, because it is implicit in the word sacrifice that you're giving something up, right? You can't sacrifice your opponent's creatures. That's just called murder, right? So as an additional cost to cast this, sacrifice any number of creatures, okay? Now, probably, let's just say skull, sarcophagus. There we go. Okay, so there's that. For each creature sacrificed, skull sarcophagus gains the following effects. So this templating you've sort of chosen here, excuse me, doesn't quite work for this card. And here's why. So first of all, it just reads a little strangely, right? Like I get what it's doing, but it's not super clear here what's going on. The other thing is, like, if you could sacrifice between 1 to 3 creatures to give this death touch, why would you ever sacrifice 3 creatures? You would just sacrifice 1, right? Same here, you would sacrifice 4, and here you would sacrifice 7. You're not going to be like, well, I'll sacrifice 3 creatures. I mean, I guess you could be if you're playing a sacrifice deck, but, like, you know, let's just, you know, simplicity is a good thing. So the other thing is that these bonuses are quite small for the amount of creatures you're sacrificing. Like, sacrificing a creature is often like so sacrificing 1 creature is a cost, but you can kind of get around it by having a creature that's, like, you know, comes back from the dead, or has some effect when it dies, or it has an ETB effect, so you've already gotten some value out of it, like, you know, stuff like that. Once you start getting into the 2 and 3 creature category, like, it becomes a lot more difficult. Sacrificing 4 creatures to give a 10/10 death touch and fear is, like, not, it doesn't seem worth it at all. Like, I would, and the other thing is, like, a 10/10 doesn't need death touch. Well, why does a 10/10 need death touch? It doesn't. It's a 10/10, right? Also, fear isn't really a mechanic that's used anymore. And additionally here, protection from non-mono black is not really the way you'd want to write that out. You would basically want to say from non-mono black. Okay, so you basically want this to have protection from everything except for mono black, right? So you would basically just say skull sarcophagus gains protection from all colors except black, right? I guess you would also have to add colorless in that, right? If you really want it. Skull sarcophagus gains protection from colorless and all colors except black. If you do that, then only mono black things can target it, right? So going through all that, I did touch on some of the issues here with the design, but let me sort of backtrack to the wording for a moment. I think a better way to word this would probably be something like this. As an additional cost to cast Skull Sarcophagus, let's see. Choose one. Long dash. I don't know the ASCII code for long dash. And then you would have bullet here, which again, I'm just going to use a dash, but sacrifice a creature. Sacrifice 4 creatures. Actually, okay, given I actually do want to go back to the way you did it. Sacrifice any number of creatures. Okay? And you could say, when Skull Sarcophagus enters the battlefield, which is also something you didn't specify here, is when this happens. All right. When Skull Sarcophagus enters the battlefield, if a creature was sacrificed, Skull Sarcophagus, I'm just going to go ahead and copy that so that I don't have to keep typing that out, gains Death Touch. If at least 4 creatures were sacrificed, Skull Sarcophagus gains Fear. You also don't. The other thing, you don't capitalize keywords. You only capitalize them if they're at the beginning of a line here. If at least 7 creatures were sacrificed, Skull Sarcophagus gains protection from colorless and all colors except black. Okay, so that's probably how you would word this. You could also do something where you say, like, as an additional cost, choose 1. Sacrifice 1 creature. Skull Sarcophagus enters the battlefield with Death Touch. Sacrifice 4 creatures. Skull Sarcophagus enters the battlefield with Death Touch and Fear. Sacrifice 7 creatures. Skull Sarcophagus enters the battlefield with protection, blah, blah, blah. But I think this is probably the way to do it. Okay, so wording aside, and there actually might be a better way to word this. Jadefire, put it in the comments if you have a better way to word this, and we'll I'll ask Gloomy and Sunny to maybe take a look at the comments and see if he sees a better way to word this, because this is definitely very wordy. Okay, so that being said, okay, let's go into the design for a minute here. So I mentioned before, this is a 10/10. It doesn't need Death Touch. So off the bat, like, that is just such a minor upside for sacrificing like a creature. But that's fine because you're only sacrificing 1 creature. But here, to sacrifice 4 creatures to gain Fear, and Fear. So Fear is not a mechanic that they really make anymore. So I'd kind of suggest against Fear. I would maybe just say Trample. Trample's probably a good one. Like, honestly, well, let's continue. And then this protection. So the protection is cool. I like the protection. And in fact, I mean, sacrificing 7 creatures, you might as well just make this thing indestructible, okay? Just make it indestructible. Like, so here's kind of the way I might design something like this, is if you sacrifice 1 creature, you get Trample, okay? Because with your 10/10, Trample is a really nice bonus, right? It means it can't just jump block it. For 2, not sure yet. For 3, indestructible. Okay. And for 2, what do we want for 2 here? So Trample, indestructible. How about each opponent sacrifice it, or discards a card. At 10 mana. Something like this. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or something. Creature. Or what you could do is you could do something like this, where you go... Now, you can... Indestructible... And here you could say... On ETB... Destroy target creature. Or... Permanent. I don't know. That's not really Black's thing. Creature or planeswalker. Something like that, right? Or you could even... The thing is, like, okay, at 10 mana, you can make this thing pretty powerful. Like, a 10 mana 10/10 vanilla is not really that good of a card, right? I mean, it's hard to get to 10 mana, especially in black. Okay? Now, a 10 mana 10/10 trample is better, but still not amazing. I mean, there's better things you can do with your mana than play a 10 mana 10/10 trample. Now, obviously here we've got some sacrifice synergies that we're dealing with, but that's beside the point. A 10 mana 10/10 Death Touch Fear, like, you're starting to get better there, but you have to sacrifice 4 creatures for that. That's a lot, man. So I really think you can kind of go off the wall with this thing at 10 mana. Like, why not just go like trample indestructible, enters the, and then like for 3 creatures, or maybe you could even do like go up to like 5 or something, right? So it's like 1, 2, 5 or 1, 3, 5 or something like that. I mean, why don't you just say destroy each other creature or something like that? Each other creature. Like, listen, a 10 mana 10/10 and you're sacrificing, 5 creatures. Like, you better be getting something good for that. So anyway, these are just random examples, but I think my main point is here that the payoffs are way too low here for the costs of the additional sacrifice. So that's about all I have to say about this card. Let me go ahead and sort of recap everything. So in my opinion, I would not make this legendary. I would give it the artifact border, the black artifact border. I really like the idea here of getting a bonus based on how many creatures you sacrifice. I think that is a really cool idea. I would stick with that for sure. Okay. I think you need to reword this card a little bit, just to make it a little bit smoother, follow templating, and for it to make a little bit more sense. And I do believe that your payoffs here are not enough for the costs. So those are kind of my main criticisms of this card. So in total, because this card has quite a few issues, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. But I really like the concept, and I think that if this were executed properly, this could be a 7 or 8 out of 10 even. So yeah, I would suggest you make some edits to this card. And you can probably make this a really, really nice card. So yeah, that's what I think about Skull Sarcophagus. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you the next time. Thank you for watching.